Hi, Josephine. I have been thinking about how much I like reading to you and just making stuff up. So I've decided to do part one of a story that is just for you. And it's called Pumpkin's Castle Party. And I don't know where it's going to go, but here's the beginning of it. So, okay, this is about a girl called Pumpkin. Okay, so it was a Thursday and it was autumn and it was cold and rainy in London. And it was Pumpkin's end of school walk home. She only had a short way to go, but it was cold and it was very wet. So she had her coat wrapped over the back of her backpack, so she looked like a little hunchback. And she had her waterproof coat pulled tight around her, and she was scooting along the road as fast as she could to get back to her home. And she lived in Mackerel Bookshop with Mackerel, who adopted her. And they lived together, and they both really, really loved books. And usually, by the time it was the end of school, the bookshop was closed. So when she walked in, she saw that there was a fire going in the corner, and she wanted to sit in her big chair. But first of all, she said hi to Mackerel, who was in the kitchen. And Mackerel, she could see his little glasses twinkling in the light, and she said, "Hi, do you mind if I make myself a snack? I'm kind of hungry." And he looked at her and he said, "Pumpkin, you look very tired. Why don't you sit down in that big chair and I'll bring you your snack? Would you like to have your favourite one?" And she said, "Have we got olives?" And he said, "Yes, we have olives." So she took off her shoes. She curled up in a very big, very worn out old purple armchair that was right by the fire. And it was so hot by the fire that she felt like she was going to be steaming. But her clothes were gradually drying, and he brought over her favourite thing to eat as an after school snack. It was a toasted bagel with lots of cream cheese on the top that was starting to melt. And he had got olives and he cut them open like little butterflies and laid them all over the top of the cream cheese. And he had got some really big, round, buttery ones, and they were extra juicy. And as soon as she saw it, her mouth started to water. And while she was having her snack, Mackerel came and sat down next to her. And he said, "I'm going to be closing the shop early tomorrow." And she said, "Oh, how come? Because it's Friday. Don't we do a lot of business on Fridays?" And he said, "Normally, but I have a mission for you. One of our special missions." And Pumpkin knew he was talking about rare books because they were both kind of experts on books. And they knew that some books were very rare and valuable and they cost a lot of money. And rich people like to collect them and sell them and trade them. But the trouble with these people was they never read them. They never looked inside them. And Mackerel was always watching the news and reading about the deliveries of these books and where people were going and showing them and buying them and all the auction houses and the fancy shops. And their missions were not really legal. They were kind of criminal. But what they were doing wasn't actually that mean. What they were trying to do was secretly take photos of these books, take photos of all the pages, so that one day, maybe a few years from now, they could share those pictures and everybody in the world could enjoy them because books are for sharing. And they just didn't like that people didn't share certain books. And they knew how to take care of them. They knew how to open them and handle them without them getting broken. So it was a very important thing to share this knowledge. This is what they like to do. Okay, Mackerel told her some more details. He said, "There's going to be a big party up at the castle." And she said, "You mean the castle the other direction from school?" And he said, "Yeah, the big fancy castle. Sometimes they do weddings there, sometimes it's a hotel. This time there's going to be a great big party. And the person who's the host is Mrs. Dianora Jones. She has just bought a very rare and very fancy, expensive book from an ancient library. And I think we should be sharing it." So Pumpkin said, "Right, what do we need to do?" And he said, "Well, the good news is this party is a costume party. So all we need to do is make you a costume and you can sneak in, you can go upstairs and you can get pictures of that book and nobody will be any the wiser. The theme of the costume party is foods. Now, can you see over there that pile of stuff?" And he pointed into the other front room. And she could see some big squares of foam foam sheets in different colours, and some glue, and some tape, and some scissors, and thread, and other kind of stuff for making costumes. And he said, okay, I've got you all this stuff. You need to think of a food and then make a costume and have it ready by tomorrow night after school, because that's when the party happens. And she said, all right, I'll get to work. And Mackerel went into the kitchen to make dinner. And Pumpkin started making her costume. Now, she was very busy at it. She was working and working. And just before dinner was ready, she called to Mackerel and said, finished. And he said, what did you make? And she said, it's a surprise. I'll show you tomorrow. So she put her costume in the corner. And their dinner, it was chicken pie and corn on the cob. And then afterwards they had grapes. And finally, after she brushed her teeth and went to bed, she started to think about it, about her mission. And she felt the way she always did before a mission, worried but excited. So she hugged her fuzzy Squirtle and she went to sleep. The next day, she couldn't concentrate on school at all. I mean, she did her work, but she wasn't really thinking about it. All day she was thinking about the party. And after school, she came straight home and they had a special early dinner. They had tomato soup and they had grilled cheese. And then afterwards they had applesauce. And then she got changed. And she showed Mackerel the costume. She came in wearing it and he was completely amazed. It was the most amazing hot dog costume he'd ever seen. She had the bun, she had the hot dog, and that was the top of her head. And she had a lot of ketchup and mustard down the front. And the only thing she wanted to do before she went was that she wanted to get a water bottle because she was going to get really hot in the costume. So she stuck a water bottle down the back of the hot dog costume and she was ready. So they went out of the house, they got into the car, and Mackerel drove her to the party. While they drove, it was only a short drive, they talked about what she was going to do. And he said, you must be very careful. If they catch you, you'll be in big trouble. So just tell them that you were looking for something and that you were going to go back to the next room and maybe just leave. Don't take the costume off unless you really have to, because then they'll know that you're a little girl and you shouldn't be at the party, because little girls don't normally go by themselves. But I know that you're very sensible and I'm going to be waiting outside in the car. So they drove to the party. And when they got there, it was already dark. There were bright lights and music inside. And there were some people standing around the doorway. Now, she got out of the car without anybody seeing and she walked up. And it was very lucky because there were people outside in costumes already and they were just chit-chatting. There was a cucumber, there was a slice of pizza, there was a Baby Bell, there's a piece of toast with jam on it, and there was a lobster. And Pumpkin, cool as a cucumber, just walked straight past them. And she said, hi. And the Baby Bell said, hi back. And they carried on talking. And she walked into the hallway. There was a great big sweeping staircase with beautiful banisters. There were chandeliers. It was a very fine building. And the entire hallway was absolutely full of guests, all in different food costumes. She was in. And that is the end of part 1 of my story. So, I don't know if I'm going to do some more. Maybe one day I'll do a part 2. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you a story. Okay, bye.